So the idea of squat, grip, get up is just, to me, they're the broadest categories in which to train that is going to check the most boxes for longevity. And there's evidence behind it, but really if we look deep enough, like just exercise in general, movement in general is good for longevity. So the reason I picked squat, grip, and get up is because it just is doing the most for your body with the least amount of movements, but you can also fit a lot of different movements within these broad categories. So squatting, for instance, can be just a transition up and down from the ground. It can be a resting position. In certain countries, it's a way of going to the bathroom, right? It's just, you see children have to do it when they're young because they're close to the ground. It's sitting on yourself, but it's also lifting maybe the most weight you could possibly lift. So there's so much versatility. We can split the position, make it more of a split squat. We can do a ton with the squat. The same thing with grip work. It's kind of in vogue now to talk about how grip strength is tied into longevity because it's what is used in a lot of research that's looking at mortality, because it's really easy to just have somebody squeeze a hand dynamometer and assess their grip strength, but it does seem to matter. And one of the reasons that I think it matters is, one, it is a really good way. If you squeeze something with your grip as hard as possible, you're not just using your forearm and your hand, you're using your whole body better. So there's a concept of irradiation where it's just you try to make as much full body tension as you can. One of the first things you're taught to do is make a fist as hard as you can. So you're creating more grip, and then that generates neurological tension and strength basically throughout your whole body. But the other thing is the grip is the first thing to come in contact with the world when we're using our upper bodies. So you can look at grip as sort of like the conduit of upper body strength, right? If you have good grip strength, you probably have better upper body strength than someone else. And then they're sort of looking at all of the different ways that we have to use our grip to manipulate the world, but all the different exercises that can be programmed that just tie into grip strength. So it could be carries, it can be actually lifting from the ground, and something like a deadlift, which is typically thought of as a hip dominant movement. If you don't grip the bar well, you're not gonna be able to lift very heavy weight if you can't grip it, right? And you can see the difference in just a traditional deadlift with a traditional bar versus like a wide grip deadlift. The amount of weight that can be lifted with one versus the other is insanely different. So the grip matters. The grip matters when you're doing things like pull-ups. So any type of pulling movement tends to incorporate grip. The other thing that I think is underestimated is something like a kettlebell swing, kettlebell snatch, or even some type of Olympic lift where you have to grip the bar, but it can't be too tight, it can't be too loose. So there's more of a reactive grip to allow for velocity, but still not lose the bar and still be able to lift heavier weights and not lose that weight. That sort of teaches the reactivity of grip. And you know, there's multiple ways that you have to use the grip, and it just sort of ties into using the whole upper body. And then getting up and down from the ground is this like a beautiful assessment of many things. It's range of motion. It can be strength if we load it. It's a sort of a fluidity of how well do we tolerate rolling into different positions and getting up and down. There's plenty of ways we can do it. It's usually can be done popping up from your belly, which would look more like some type of a burpee. In yoga, it could be like a sun salutation where, you know, that's a version of getting up and down off the ground, and you stop a bunch of places along the way and breathe and stretch and kind of get yourself into different positions that you can control. But the more fluid you are getting up and down off the ground, the more you tend to get out of the practice. And we could also look at something like with the kettlebell, like a Turkish get-up, where you're starting on your back, and it's sort of a combination of a sit-up, a bridge, a lunge. There's a bunch of things happening all at once. And all of this could be traced back to, if you, again, looking at it, children, as they go from being infants where they can't do much, the first thing that they learn to do is get up from the ground. So all of the steps that it takes for a child to eventually stand and walk, we can train that, and we actually end up losing that in a similar way. And you always hear the analogy is like, as a person gets older, they start to sort of revert back to what they were like as children. So they become more dependent. They need more help from their children, where they were the ones taking care of their children before. So you get this sense of, can I do the things I had to do when I was developing? Well, that keeps you young in a way, but there's many things to assess along the way. So it's not that there's anything special about any of the particular movements. Like a back squat isn't what we're talking about with the squat. Any type of like bar hang, which is really in vogue now for grip strength, isn't what we're talking about. We're just talking about these things as broad categories, and there's so many things that can be done within these 3 broad categories that if you are working on all 3, most likely you're not missing much in your fitness endeavors.